Yes. That's a great thing to forget about.
Yeah, 5 minutes. We're ready to They were yeah, which is fine. So if you think we're fine, I think we're fine. Sorry. Yes, I can. Okay, they can hear us. Hey. All right, we're good.
So folks online, I think you can hear. If you want to join us in some activities, I'd love to hear from you both in the chat as well as through the app. So Slido.com, we'll be using this, so you can either scan the QR code or go to Slido.com and use that code that you see there. I'm going to be addressing your brothers and sisters in the room now, but I will come back and have some conversations with you as well as they're doing work in their states. All right? So, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So, first and foremost, want to tell you, does anyone have one of these smartphones or mobile devices? All right, so if you have those, if you can take them out and keep them on, because we will be using these as we do our work today. And so as you can see up on the screen, and I've already talked to the folks in the chat room online about this, we'll be using this thing called Slido.com, and you can either click on the QR code there, or go directly to Slido.com and enter that code to answer some of the questions that we'll be engaging during this session. You'll also find in your workbook, there are QR codes there. Those go a little deeper into some of the lecture topics and some of the things that we'll be talking about. And there will be exercises that you can do on your own. So this is really kind of a hybrid model presentation that we'll be engaging in today. So we'll go through some of the questions and whatnot on Slido. We'll have conversations at our tables. I will be asking people to possibly move tables, so I want you to be prepared to do that, or to move around the room to do those things. And we'll also be talking with our colleagues online. So there'll be kind of this hybrid approach. Please recognize that I think you've gotten the agenda. You may have even gotten the presentation. And so know that if it feels a little bit chaotic, or I like to think of it as being organic, right? So this is a kind of a choose your own adventure opportunity, and we'll engage in that. So before we begin, I just would like to take a moment of silence to recognize all of those folks who have sacrificed that we might be here sitting in these seats. That includes American Indians, Native Americans, depending on what community you're in, they're called different things. Immigrants, children of people held in the economic system of slavery, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, immigrants who sacrifice things. So I just want to take a moment of silence to recognize all of those ancestors that sacrificed so that we might be here. Oh, I'm sorry, let me, as well as refugees. There is a difference between immigrants and refugees, and I do want to recognize that as well. So if we can just take a moment of silence, thank you. Thank you. Why might that be important to start this particular session with? This idea that folks sacrifice that we might be here. Why might that be important? I know that's a tough question so early in the morning and right before we've gotten all of our coffee or breakfast. But why might that be important to center ourselves in that perspective? Yes, please.
I think we bring our stories with us wherever we go, and that's kind of like our identity and how we work with others and how we understand the world, and also know the reason how people understand us.
Yeah, so we bring our stories wherever we go, right? It's funny, my niece was talking about moving to a different city so she could have a different experience. And I just shared with her, I said, no matter where you go, there you are, right? And so if you want a different experience, you may want to share your story different or make your story different, right? Why else might it be important just to center ourselves in this recognition that folks sacrifice that we might be here? Yes.
This may not be as maybe a little cliche, but appreciate what you got.
Yeah, so it allows you to appreciate what you have, right? It allows you to appreciate what you have. Yes.
I was going to say, I think it's important to remember that humanity doesn't start with us, that the human condition has existed long before we came and will continue to exist long after we do.
That it's important to recognize that the universe did not start with us and it doesn't end with us, right? I think it's also interesting, you know, for those folks who have a faith tradition, the books that we use that inform how we do our faith typically are thousands of years old. What does that suggest about the human condition? That we have, you know, those of us who have a faith tradition that holds sacred a book or a text or something. What does that suggest about the human condition, to your point?
It hasn't changed all that.
We haven't changed all that much. So that book that was written thousands of years ago still applies today because our human condition isn't that different. And what is exciting and exhilarating about recognizing that? Particularly in this world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and acceptance, and accessibility, and belonging. What's exciting about recognizing? Yes?
Well, probably that we have more in common than the things that separate us.
Yeah, that we have more in common than the things that separate us, right? And so some of the themes that we'll talk about today is those commonalities and differences and why they matter, right? Why they matter. There are some folks who want to just talk about our similarities, and I appreciate those folks. And then there are those folks who just want to talk about our differences, and I can understand those folks. But what I also recognize is that there are both of those things, that the truth is on both sides of that coin. Right? So thank you for that. For those who just came in, we'll be using Slido.com, and you can use that QR code. Please leave your mobile devices out because we'll be using them, and we're all professionals, so we know how to use them, right? So So there is that. A little bit about me. My name is Andre Koen, and I've been in this kind of, it was funny, I interviewed for a job, and the person who was interviewing me was talking about all their accolades, right? So they were talking about how they, did DEI at Twitter, and they did DEI with all of these other things, and I just kind of laughed, and they asked me, tell me a little bit about your experience. And I told them, I said, the funny thing is, I was doing diversity work before there was a D, before there was an E, and before there was an I, right? I was the affirmative action officer for Anoka County back in the day when those kinds of terms were the ones that we used for this kind of work. And so with that recognition, though, is that as things have changed and adapted, I think it's important for us to recognize that our language, our thoughts, our concepts, if we want to be effective, need to adapt and change as well. Right? And so, I would imagine that our ancient ancestors looked up at the sky and said, "That's a fireball in the sky." But then at some point, some folks realized that it's more than that. That it is actually it's the center of the universe, as folks thought, right? In that enlightenment stage. And then we got to the point to recognize that that's not just the center of the universe, it is a heavenly body among many heavenly bodies. And so our language and the way we think changed as we became more enlightened. And we'll talk more about that in just a bit as well. I am curious, I do want to take a little bit of time, and I know you all know each other, and this is, if I'm not mistaken, your final session together, is that correct?
No, second
One
to
more.
last.
Second, you have one more after this?
Yeah,
Okay,
but
cool. All right, but you are relatively familiar with each other, is that
Yeah.
correct? All right, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I happen not to be familiar with you, so if you wouldn't mind, if we could start at this table and then move to this table, sharing your name and an expectation that you have for this session. All right, so your name and an expectation you have for this session. Yeah, feel free. Yeah. So we'll start at this table and then move to this one and so forth and so on. So would you mind?
Yep. So I'm Andre M Koen, and what I hope to gain from this training is to, take on a more of a leadership role here at LSS.
Okay.
My name is Trisha, for DLW in general, I've just kind of gone along for the ride, so I'm excited for whatever happens next.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I'm Ashley Jaguar. I have no expectations for this training and I'm excited to learn more.
All right, cool.
I'm Grace Vogland, and I'm excited to learn how to show up more authentically.
Wonderful.
My name is Keisha Mitchell, and I'm excited for this training. My expectation is to learn something different.
All right, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Cyrus Hare, and DEI is, something I'm passionate about, so I'm excited to learn how to be able to utilize this within my team.
I'm Nicole Fick, and I guess I'm just excited to learn tools and to just gain more knowledge on the subject.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, I am Emily Crawford, and I am also, my expectation is also to take on a more leadership role through LSS.
Morning, I'm Ann Rosenberg. I'm excited to learn some new tools that I can bring back not only to my job at Wilder, but also to the Minnesota Kid Playing Association.
Right behind you.
Yeah, I'm Jason Foster. I'm with LSS IT Support, and I'm interested in learning new techniques for incorporating DEI into my experience as a manager.
My name is Kim Miller, and I would like to continue to practice these tools and techniques to kind of so they become more second nature, and it becomes like part of my daily practice in here, as opposed to just something that I do every so often.
name is Sherry Swopes, and I just want to continue to grow as a leader and continue to build relationships with everybody in the room, so we can come together and continue to talk about being great leaders.
Wonderful.
Hi, my name is Lee, and I'm from the Wilder Foundation, and I'm looking forward to just dive deeper into like diversity, and how that works and more creatively.
Hi, my name is Sia, also from Wilder. I am hoping to learn something more from you, your expertise.
No pressure.
Marcy, John Lutheran Social Service. Just kind of like everyone else said, learning something new, so that it's not uncomfortable to talk about. Grew up Southwest Minnesota, predominantly white community, so I'm kind of like sheltered. So, yeah, just kind of broaden my horizons a little bit too.
My name is Jen Christensen, and I'm just excited for the conversation and to hear what everyone's going to bring to this topic.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Melody. I'm from LSS. I want to tell you that I'm strategic, so sometimes if I'm really learning, I don't share. So it's not that I'm not wanting to share today, and I'm going to take, one person set up the word authentic, and I want to learn to be more authentic and purposeful, like Kim said, and help this to be more like second nature within me. Because sometimes I think I have to put effort in, and then we say that that's not really true to ourselves, and so I think I like what Kim said, it's just this being more second nature to me.
Yeah, but I just want to stick a pin in that, right? So I really appreciate you sharing and recognize that if you do not want to share, I'm really not going to make you do that, right? Which is why there are opportunities to write things down, and we'll talk about those things and that kind of thing. But the other thing that I just want to stick a pin in what you just said, because it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful, that folks have said that they want this to be second nature, right? So before it becomes second nature, it has to be what?
First nature.
First nature. And so what does that mean to be first nature?
Automatic.
You're cognizant of it.
Yeah, you have to be cognizant of it, right? And so it has to be difficult. It has to be hard. And you have to keep doing it, right? Think about a craft. Any crafters? Anybody play a sport? Anyone sing or play an instrument? When you woke up and you entered into that thing, were you the expert that you are today when you first took it on? No. I have a 4th grader. She has started violin. Please pray for us. Right? But I am so excited that she is excited about her squeaks and about her stuff, because at some point, she will actually play something that is recognizable. Right? But this work is very much the same way. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm really excited about the compassion and the willingness that you have to do the work. But I also think that it's interesting that we don't recognize that. All right, I'm going to ask you to put yourself out here just for a second. Who's really good with money? Right? I happen to be one of those people that's not good with money. Right? I'm a bad capitalist. It just never works out for me. Right? The interesting thing about that is that people who say that they're, and I'll speak for myself, are bad with money is because I don't know enough about money. I didn't have people around me to teach me about money. Right? So I'm finding about credit scores. I'm like, oh, cool. You mean you can leverage stuff just on your credit? And like, oh my goodness, right? And so I don't have confidence because I don't have competence. And so when we think about this DEI stuff, oftentimes we don't have confidence because we don't have the competence necessary to do those things. Right? or to have those conversations. So hopefully I'm going to give you some things that help you use those muscles so you get more confidence through competence. All right? So we're going to go to this table, if you could.
Hold on, just tweaking
I just what?
my mind. Just tweaking my mind.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm Jess Benedict, I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, so I hope with this training I can get my confidence to communicate with my peers and parents.
Thank you. Yes.
My name's John, I'm with Wellwood. I guess what I am most looking for in this session is some tools and techniques to allow us to become more sorry, I just totally lost what I was going to say. Give me just a moment.
Yep.
Sorry.
So please pop your hand up when it does come back, because I'm of the age that I got to get it out real quick too. Yes.
Hi, my name is Mary. I'm with LSS. I'm excited for this conversation. I hope to have it be more first nature for me and be more cognizant, and this is important. So I want to just learn from you and from everyone else today.
Wonderful.
Hi everyone, I'm Lee Banner with LSS. So looking the title and all that, you know, we hear a lot of time diversity, but I would be more interested to hear from you how it would be different than the ones I had in the past. You know, it's something we mention a lot of places, but my question would be how that could be not only something we write down somewhere, but in action.
Absolutely. So hopefully you'll get that, but it's already different because I'm different. Yes.
Seamlessly adaptable in unfamiliar experiences and settings, I was trying to say.
Yes. Thank you. So making sure that we can apply this in a number of different situations, in a number of different contexts, right? Yes.
Making community with social service. I would say my background is intercultural communication studies. That's what I got my degree in. So I've been talking about diversity for years. But I obviously have been in the workforce for a long time. So, or actually, let me stop. I'm not that old. But
It's all relative. It's all relative.
Those teenagers today, you know, like I'm only in my 30s. But anyway, but it happened about 10 years since I've been out of college, and you know, you learn a lot of the key ways of discussing diversity, the key jargon, and I feel like I'm out of the loop because I don't even know what a DEI is, and we were talking about that in college. So yeah, I want to learn more about the ways to have more agency, how to talk about my experiences, and how to kind of empathize with other people who are going through it, and how to talk to people who are non-Black or whatever about what what my experience is, so that they can understand it.
Yeah.
Better way of talking about these issues.
Cool. Thank you.
I'm Brittany Toms, I'm with LSS. I am excited to learn new tools to bring to my volunteers, as I have 40 volunteers that are in northern Minnesota, which is a predominantly white area, and we just don't see that very often, and some of those people definitely need the tools to understand diversity and how to go about things the correct way.
I know about ranchers. Yes.
Hi there, I'm Nancy Magiston. I work in risk management. And as much as I have to learn and grow, similar to what you said, I recently moved to a new suburb that's predominantly white as well. And I look forward to learning tools that I can use to work, work better with my neighbors.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
I live in Walden. I think we have to open my application. I don't have any applications. Hopefully I'm not new. I just want to keep an open mind and take all this.
All right. Cool. Open. All right. And I think, yes.
I'm Nadine Dahl with LSS. I guess mainly to learn more, understand more things that I don't know. For example, I was about to say, my blind spot, which is also not inclusive,
You know, every time we have this conversation, there's always something more that I don't know.
Yeah.
My perspective of the world.
Wonderful. Yes.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Camrock, I live in Wilder. I'm hoping, to kind of, so we talk about DEI a lot, we talk about it as just these letters that can feel a little abstract at times. And so I heard someone use the word practice, but, you know, what does it mean? What is, like, how do you do it? What are the experiences of it? How can we make it a little bit more like a human experience rather than just some concept and thing? So,
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yes.
Hi, I think come in a little late, so I'm not sure what exactly what everybody answering to.
So, yeah, so simply, you know, your name and then what are your expectations for this session?
My expectation for this session?
Yes.
I guess just to expand my knowledge on diversity in general.
Okay.
You know, I'm from Georgia, so I have been, you know, around different diversity of people, you know, and all that type of deal. Then moving here was a little different. I'm adjusting, still learning, but I'm, you know, open and I'm always curious and where I can learn.
All right, cool, cool, cool. Thank you. And lastly.
I'm Renee from LSS, and I'm here to learn just, you know, exactly what that title is about how to incorporate EID and leadership into further and effective that you offer.
All right, great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So this idea that this is that DEI can be a tool of leadership, what does that suggest? That it is a tool of leadership? Yes.
That there's multiple tools?
That there are multiple tools of leadership, right? And so when we think about this notion of a toolbox, I've been watching a lot of DIY YouTube videos, and what I found out is that oftentimes when I go to take on a project or Pinterest, anyone like Pinterest? I'm a Pinterest fan. One of the things that they don't show you in Pinterest that I do like to see in the videos is that on Pinterest they say, here are the pieces, you go make it. And when I do that, I become the feature content creator for the sister site of Pinterest called Pinterest Fails. Because my stuff never quite looks like the Pinterest pictures. But what I discovered by watching the YouTube videos is that I figured out why my Pinterest stuff doesn't work. And when you watch the YouTube videos, you see why your Pinterest stuff doesn't work, because you don't have the tools, or in my case, I don't have the tools that those professionals who are doing the YouTube videos have. And so I can't come up with what they come up with because I don't have those same tools, which means that I need to get more tools. So my wife does not like hearing that. Like, I need another one. Anyway. So what I want to give you are some tools, and that this is a set of tools that I have found to be helpful, which means that as you talk to other leaders or other folks in this space, they may have another set of tools, or they may have different tools. And so this is not the end-all be-all presentation today. Take this and add this to all the other things that you're not only learning in these cadre sessions, but out in the world at large. So thank you so much for sharing. I wrote some of those things down to hold myself accountable and to try to see if I can get to all of those things. You had quite a laundry list, so I'm not sure if I am going to try to get to all of it. You don't need to know anything more about me, but I do want to set this up really quickly and then get you moving, because you've been sitting for a little bit for quite a while. But as you are, brothers and sisters online, if you can let me know that you're still with me by giving just type the number 1 in the chat room. and then I'll know that you're still with me, all right? So as we're, okay, good, Jacob, thank you. As you're looking at this picture, this iconography, what do you recognize about this picture, or what stands out to you about the picture itself? What stands out about the picture itself? Yes?
Well, the number 13 was perceived differently by both parties.
So both parties perceive something that is external to them differently. All right? What else do you recognize about, or what else comes up for you when you look at this picture?
It's alarming to them. They've got an exclamation point.
So there's either something that's alarming to them, or there's some communal way that they are intrigued by each other, as demonstrated by the exclamation point. Anything else stand out or jump out at folks? Yes?
This is so weird, but it's the same person, but different hairstyles and different clothes, and they're mirroring
each other,
thank you,
right?
each other. Thank you.
Yeah, so they could be
That's
mirroring
not
each other.
right.
They're very
Yeah.
similar in a lot of ways, right? Yes?
It's, if you look at the one on the bottom, like it's clear to see it could easily go either way.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously there's probably more things too, but if you look at the bottom, like one person could easily see that as 13 and another as a B. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's,
Yeah. Yes?
I was kind of what I was gonna say, like, they're both not wrong, like.
That was gonna,
They're not wrong.
right, that was gonna be my next question. Which one is wrong and which one is right? And how much energy do you think it would be spent trying to convince the other of the other? So one of the things that I've done over my career is I've been anybody seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? Right? So improvisational comedy is what I've done. And one of the rules that they've taught us is this thing called yes and. Right? Anybody? You said it too. So have you done improv too?
No, I'm just in a sorority.
Oh, okay. She was like, I'm just in a sorority, so I don't know I don't know. Anyway. Anyway, so yeah, yes and, right? And so this notion of we can spend a lot of time trying to say, you're wrong and I'm right, and no, and then just waste an opportunity to actually see a different perspective, right? And so when we think about this notion of our ground rules and our agreements, I only have one ground rule, and I'll get to that last, but these agreements, these are the things that I really want us to kind of focus on as leaders, right? So, so as leaders. So first, I want us to focus our attention on goals. So what is the goal of our interactions together? And what are our intentions as we interact with someone who is, quote unquote, different from ourselves, right? So focus on goals. Sometimes people will say, well, I want to know this about Hmong people, da 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 da. Okay, that's cool that you want to know that, and that's cool that we want to talk about that. But I want to know, what are you going to do with that information, and how does it help you to become more effective? Because if it doesn't, I don't know, you're just nosy, right? You're just nosy. So if you're not going to use that information to be helpful, align our thoughts and our behaviors to our values. When I think about what it means to be authentic, that's the pinnacle for me. Aligning my thoughts, my behaviors with my values, right? So what do we call people who don't live to their values? Or they have values, but then their behaviors are way off somewhere. What do we call those people?
Hypocrites.
We call them hypocrites, right? We call them hypocrites. And they typically don't get the respect. They don't get power and influence that's not based on fear, right? So those hypocrites also use fear as a tool, but we're going to talk about leadership that doesn't require fear or hypocrite or being a hypocrite. All right, engage in curiosity, not judgment. What does judgment do to creativity? It stifles it, right? When we think about this idea of being curious, what does curiosity do?
Opens doors.
engage.
It helps us expand. It engages. It helps us open doors, right? So, and curiosity increases energy and drive and attentiveness. Where this judgment stuff, I already know that. I'm not surprised by that, right? Which then breeds cynicism. And what comes after cynicism? Harm, right? Because I don't see someone's perspective as effectively as I can see my own. All right? And then offer other people what you need. So if you need patience, be patient. If you need respect, be respectful. I'll never forget. So I was teaching at a charter school at the corner of University and Wheeler. Well, it's not really the corner, but that is a corner. Yeah, right. And I had an 8th grader who was 6'2", just big boned. And he came up to me one day. He said, "Mr. K, you got to earn my respect." I said, "I can get with that. That's cool. I like that." Right? I said, "What's the syllabus? When is the final exam for earning respect?" You know, that just messed with his head. He was like, "What?" I said, "How about this? How about I be respectful to you and you be respectful to me? And we are respectful to each other even when the other is being disrespectful to us."
Oh, Lord.
Right? He was like, okay, yeah, let's try that. Right? Yes, please.
Well, you know, because that's an example, like, he wasn't expecting that. He was expecting you to basically fire back, you know, because he was like, all right, I'm going to challenge your authority by saying either you respect me or we're going to have some beef, but you didn't come, basically didn't respond like that, which messed with his head.
Why is it important as leaders to kind of keep people, and I'm not trying to be manipulative, but to keep people a little bit off balance so that they're cognitive in their engagement? Why is that important?
To generate an original response. I mean, if you have a lot of us fall into, at times, predefined responses, or if there's a challenge, it can put people on the defensive. The defensive generates a reactionary response, whereas if you ask open-ended questions or give them doors to walk through, people will think more creatively about answers rather than leaning into something that might just be a go-to process of communication.
And in most cases, we're playing records that were given to us. Records? Yeah. Okay. Right? We're playing tapes or MP3s that have already been downloaded into our system. You gotta relate, right? So if we're not mindful, I would suggest that we are mindless. Right? All right. And lastly is give grace. And why is it important for us to give grace?
Get grace. We better give grace.
Because we've been the recipients of much grace. There were tons of behaviors that I had as an elementary age child that my parents gave me grace on. They said, Andre, you should probably not do that. And we're going to work on you and work with you until you get the kinds of behaviors that will make you socially acceptable. Like, 6th grade and hygiene. Right? right? So give grace because we've been given grace. And back to your point, that's how we receive grace, by giving, right? However, what's the other side of grace? So I've given you grace. You've called me something that's not acceptable or according to the values in our workplace. You've used a word or a phrase that's not supported by our values. I've given you grace. Now what?
You also need accountability.
Accountability, right? Because grace without accountability is grease. Right? people think they can just slide by. Right? So when we think about this idea of giving grace, it is grace and accountability. All right? So those are some of the agreements. The last ground rule that I have is treat people how they wish to be treated. The platinum rule. Folks have heard of the golden rule, right? What is the golden rule?
Do unto others as they do unto you.
That's right. Do unto others as they do unto you. But what does it mean and that's a great starting spot, right? That's a great starting spot. And then we graduate to high school. And in high school, we're saying, treat others the way they wish to be treated. What do you have to know about other people in turn, or what needs to happen for you to know how they want to be treated?
Listen.
You have to listen. What else? You have to ask. What else? You have to care.
Get to know them.
You have to get to know them. You have to have relationships, right? So if I want to know how you want to be treated, I have to be in close proximity to you and have relationship with you and talk with you. Because not only do I have to listen, but you'll tell me how you want to be treated, right? So important things to kind of think about as we roll forward. So I'm going to do one activity and then take a break so you get an opportunity to move around a bit. So what I'd like you to do, if you can go to Slido right now, and again, it's slido.com, and I want you to answer these. And so if you could put one thing in one entry and then push enter, and then another entry and then push enter for all 5 things. All right, so one at a time. You don't have to do this. This is just a suggestion. I think it'd be interesting to see what our brothers and sisters online are also thinking as well. So 5 things that you value. And once we get to about 22 people, we'll start talking about these things. All right, we're at 28. Oh, cool, great. 30. So can the folks online speak?
They
Or-
should be able to if they unmute. We
If they
should be able
unmute.
to hear them.
Okay,
Yes, I
cool,
hope so.
cool. So I'm going to ask if someone who's online could you unmute, and as you're looking at this presentation, what stands out for you as you're looking at all of these words? Or will we be able to hear them?
I'm hoping so. Stephanie, will you unmute? I see them typing because usually that's how they participate. Or, yeah, there we go. Stephanie, you talk.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Perfect,
Okay, yes,
thank
yes,
you.
yes. Great, thank you. So what stands out for anyone online? And Stephanie, if you want to start, that would be helpful. As you're looking at these words, what stands out for you?
They're all pretty positive.
They're all pretty positive words, that people value positive things, all right? So if someone else from online wants to jump in, please do. I'm going to now come back to the room. Those of us in the room, what do you notice about these? First of all, do folks understand how word clouds work? So this is a word cloud, right? So can someone explain just in case the folks online aren't familiar with a word cloud, how do word clouds work?
Are the
bold words, ones that are used more than once.
Yep, so
So
bold.
the bigger they are, the more people know it.
Right, so the bigger the commonality, the bigger the word, right? So that's how this word cloud works. So what are folks noticing about this word cloud?
So-
Yes, please.
Yeah, so obviously, family is something that many people have in common as a value, but also integrity is something, and honesty is something that there's a lot of synonyms for that. I mean, you see integrity, honesty, authenticity, trust. You know, those are all synonyms for one another. So
Yeah.
I think that and family are the ones two that obviously stand out.
Yeah. I saw another hand. Yes.
Most of them are attributes rather than things.
Most of those are attributes rather than things, right? So you don't see cars or boats or trips to Belize, right? Yeah. One more thought. Yes.
I like that someone put my dog.
Someone-
As a dog owner, I didn't write that, but I'll feel that one.
Good point. Let me stick a pin in that point too. So, are there other people who value their dogs but didn't put it on their thing? Please raise your hand if you value your dog too. All right, cool. Interesting. I did see a hand in the back. Yes.
I'm just gonna say there's a lot more than 5 things on there, like there's a big variety of.
There's a big variety of things, which means that when we thought about those 5 things, many of us had very different perceptions of what those 5 things could be, right? Is there anything on here, and I'm going to take a risk, this is risky, is there anything on here that you would disagree with as being an important value either to yourself or to someone else? Okay, yeah.
Money. I don't value it. I don't rate it because humans came up with it, and it's just another way for what is that word called? Like a hierarchy to kind of diminish somebody's value versus a group of, like, most billionaires are not good people. So they don't have a lot of money. So
I'm going to pause on that because we can't tell somebody's character because we don't want people to judge us the way, right? So I don't know about that. I think your point may be valid.
Their actions, their actions don't speak.
So your perception of their actions are not congruent with. Right, yes.
Their actions still cool, so I don't like that.
I'm gonna kind of break, kind of go off point here. So for me, I didn't, basically devalue or disagree with anything because I feel like that's everybody's personal preference. So that kind of, what she was saying, like her perception of people who value money, is, again, no disrespect here, but like kind of what we are used to seeing, people that, have all this money and don't seem to give a squat about, the everyday common person. And that's all like, within that particular perception. But for me, like you were saying, like, don't judge, don't do anything like that. It's not my place to say, okay, you're wrong for, valuing this, or no, you're wrong for doing that. I mean, because that's their personal preference, just like I wouldn't want nobody saying that to me. You know what I mean?
So my daughter's just got, thank you so much. My daughter's just got some socks. And the socks say, and excuse my frank language, it says, do no harm and take no shit.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Right?
Where'd
So-
you get 'em? Yeah.
I need a t-shirt like that.
Right? So I'm working with my daughter. We're gonna do no harm, but we're not gonna, take stuff from folks. Right? Anyway, I hope you're able to see commonalities and differences. And like I promised you, I'm going to do one activity, get you, and then we'll take a break, if you don't mind. So we'll take a break right at 10 o'clock. So let's just get to that activity. So thank you so much. You all have been absolutely amazing thus far. And I'm just in the introduction. You can tell I haven't been in front of people for a long time because I'm loving this. So what I'd like you to do, so this is an activity that I refer to as triangles, right? And some of you have printed this out or you can just look at the screen and do this activity with us. What I'd like for you to do is I want you to count the number of triangles that you see in this picture, and then write that number down someplace, either in your notebook or in the margins somewhere. Count the number of triangles that you see. And so for those of you online, I'm going to pivot to you first. Please type in the chat room the number of triangles that you see, and we'll pivot to you first, and then we'll come to the room. So those of you online, just type in the chat room the number of triangles that you see on this slide, and then we'll come back to the room once we've pivoted to you. So Jacob, are you available to? Okay, cool. So Jacob said he sees 12. Thank you, Jacob.
There's another one for 8.
There's another one for 8. Did somebody say 17? Oh, you saw 17? Okay, in the room. What are some other numbers that folks see? 11. Okay, so 11, lots of 11s, 8s. 14.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and double advocate, I'm gonna go 0, because none are really close.
Yep, so what I want to tell you just really quick, I don't know if the rest of the group heard that, but someone wants to be the devil's advocate, and I want to tell you he doesn't need an advocate. He's been doing this stuff for a long time, and he's really good at it. But your point is very interesting, right? So let's so we have from 17 online to 11 to 8 to 14 in the room. And then we have a couple of zeros, right? So we have a couple of zeros. So before we go further, what I want to do is I'd like for someone in the room, if you could define for me a triangle. How do you define a triangle?
3 equilateral sides.
So 3 equilateral sides, but can you have a triangle that doesn't have 3 equilateral sides?
Yes.
Okay. So that is, so you can have one that has equilateral sides, or you can have one that is obtuse or acute triangle with 3 sides. What are the other features of a triangle?
It's all on one plane.
So it's on one plane, so in this particular case, it's a one-dimensional object, but theoretically, it could be 3-dimensional.
That would be a pyramid.
That would be a pyramid. Absolutely, correct. What else? Or a prism, right? What else?
Well, I tell my children, we see a triangle is because you see 3 lines connected.
So 3 lines connected, right? So a triangle has 3 angles, 3 sides, and probably 3 corners, right? Is this a closed object or is it an open object? It is a closed object. So with that definition, I want you to go back and look at this diagram and count the number of triangles given the definition.
0.
There are, in fact, no triangles. There are 3 Pac-Man, but there are no triangles. Right? So talk to me. How do we come up with, yes?
So this is being an advocate for the devil, but unnecessary. Let's say that image, that the difference between the inside of that triangle and the outside, that the value of the white is one degree of color variation difference. You would not be able to see that there's 2 triangles or 1 triangle or 0 triangles. It would be totally undetectable.
Are you saying if the
Well, it would be different. It would be.
So there are lines there, but they're just not
They're just not
acceptable.
I would say that there are no lines. However, the patterns of life have taught us that when there is nothing, we make it up. We fill in the gaps. That our prefrontal cortex, our amygdala responds to our emotions, and that we fill in the gaps. We form it. This is called Gestalt psychology, right? Gestalt psychology, which is why one of the toughest times I had in art class was I always tried to Xerox copy the thing that I was supposed to draw, right? And that was very frustrating for me because I didn't have that skill until I realized that I don't have to Xerox copy what the teacher was asking me to draw. I had to make a facsimile. I had to make a facsimile that looked similar with all the context cues of what the instructor was asking me to draw. And my frustration level went down, right? So the same thing here. But oftentimes, we're operating with bias. We come to this particular problem to solve with our own prejudice, our prejudgment given on patterns, on context, on things that we've seen before that suggest that this should be a triangle. However, until we get a clear definition, how many times have you saw a person and said, I know exactly how this person is? And then once you get to know that person, there are things about them that surprise you, right? This is a great opportunity to help us think about our own biases, that we come into this conversation with a certain level and a certain set of biases. And it is by taking a step back and being cognitive in that process that we can manage those biases. I'm not one of those people who believes that you can actually get rid of biases, but I think it's our responsibility to manage the biases that we have, and we'll talk more about that after our break. So it is about 4 till. How about we come back at 5 after, and we'll pick this right back up. All right? So thanks so much.
I do understand at times why I was like I said, I feel like
I can work this.
yes,
It's on your resume, right? Yeah, because they'll remember.
If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. If you can hear my voice, clap 4 times. Good job. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So as we're, it's so funny how small the world is, and so I was at Aldi in my, I live in Mounds View, so next to Shoreview, and I was at Aldi, and a guy had this really great shirt, this real colorful shirt and whatnot, and I complimented him. We're in the line with my girls and I, and he's behind me, and I complimented him on his shirt. I was like, that's a really awesome shirt. And he goes, it's you. And I'm like, oh, right? Well, he was like, I follow you online. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, you post about, diversity stuff and da-da-da-da-da-da. And then he was like, my wife is in the car. She's going to be so, whatever. And I'm thinking this guy's making this stuff up. But then I'm thinking, like, why would you make something like that up? Right? And so I think it was it's a testament to the fact that how I show up in that space is how I show up in real life. And being able to see and hear people and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was very interesting. So the world is a very small place, and I would imagine that 6 degrees of separation is probably 3, right? And particularly in this realm that we're in, and that we have more, again, commonalities, and those differences matter. One of the things I wanted to kind of share with you is that all of those words that we shared about the things that we value, I would imagine that they could fall into these 3 categories of things that make us feel safe, things that make us feel significant, and things that signify our belonging, right? And I would also submit to you that I believe that all human beings are looking for these 3 primary things. And so if we're trying to help be leaders, or we're trying to help problem solve, if we took the approach of asking ourselves, which of these 3 things is this problem trying to either disrupt, or is it trying to gain? Is it safety, is it significance, or is it belonging, right? And so I remember living in a community that was kind of a challenging community. And so I have Great Danes, so I'm a big dog kind of guy, right? So I'm walking my dogs, and I keep my dogs kind of close, not because my dogs are dangerous, but I don't know what other people, how they will respond to my dog, or how their dogs respond to my dogs, right? So I keep my dogs kind of close. And so I'm walking my dogs, and one of the neighbors from his house on the porch yells out, "Do your dogs fight?" At first, I was offended. Like, what kind of person would ask somebody else if their dogs fight? Context matters. Context matters, right? And then I thought to myself, oh, this person is trying to get one of these 3 things and build a relationship with me. But it wasn't how I was used to building relationships with, right? And so guess how I responded to him? I was like, no, they don't fight, but how are you doing today? Right? Because that's what he was trying to, that's what the person was trying to communicate to me, was trying to build a rapport, but the way they did it and the way I did it didn't necessarily match. And so one of us had to either rise to the occasion or be humble enough to say, you know what, let me meet this person where they are, right? Because they're trying to get safety, significance, and belonging. And so when we think about communities of color, when we think about refugee communities, when we think about immigrant communities, when we think about rural communities versus urban communities, how they get safety, significance, and belonging may be different given the context. I heard someone say, and I wrote this down, that they were sheltered. What's the purpose of shelter?
Safety.
Safety, significance, and belonging. Right? A lot of times as I've gotten older and I've become a parent, I call my parents every week to apologize. I didn't know, right? But now I do. And so when we think about this idea of being sheltered, what could our parents give us? What could they give us?
All of it.
They could try to do those things, but they could only give us what they had. Right? Just like I used to tell my creditors, I can't give you what I don't have. Right? I don't say that no more because because I know credit.
You learned about money.
That's right. I'm learning. Right? I'm learning about money. I'm more competent. And so a lot of times I'm not really apologizing, but I'm recognizing that they could only give me what they had. And so everything they were giving me was to help secure safety, significance, and belonging. Now, what's the challenge with that? My context is different than my parents' context, right? Truth be told, not trying to trigger anybody, but my parents spanked. And guess why my parents spanked? Because they were spanked. But now I know better, right? And it's so funny because my kids are so different than how I was raised. I send them to their room and you would have thought that I had taken their iPad. Go to your room. No. But I want to do some gentle parenting. And now I'm figuring out that isolation of kids is not good either, right? And so as I'm growing and I'm developing, I'm doing the safety, significance, and belonging thing a lot different than my parents because I'm in a different context. I have a different mission, and I have different kids. My kids are not me, right? So that's important because that safety, significance, and belonging determines our methods and helps us define meaning, right? So what I find attractive, other folks might not find attractive. Pieces of art or cars or all sorts of stuff, and that's not wrong. It's for us to recognize. Right? So, if somebody becomes a billionaire and if they're ethical and they have good values and they're, not doing harm, I'm great. Go do you. The biggest challenge right now with DEI work is that people have misunderstood it, and what I hope people start to recognize is that it's not about taking something else away from people, but it's taking obstacles out of the way for people to live their own lives. And that racism and sexism and heterosexism and homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia are all obstacles that we can actually remove so that people can live their lives free, right? And so the people who don't want to be treaded on seem to be treading on other people, which is interesting. If you ever see those flags, don't tread on me, but a lot of those folks want to tread on other people. One of the things that, as a leader, I think it's important to recognize that there's a developmental model that we have to engage. And kind of go through this fast because I'm a little bit behind. But so anyone ever thought of running a marathon?
I've done.
You've done a marathon?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would never do it again.
You'll never do it again. But
I crossed it off my bucket list. I wanted to do it, I did it.
Now, do you know why is it 23 miles?
26.
26 miles. It's 26
Yeah.
miles. Why is it 26 miles, not 30 or?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Distance to marathon.
What's that?
That's the distance from Athens to marathon.
Ah, okay. So it's a distance of a place, from a place to another place. Okay. Sweet. You were in.
From what I've heard, the first person who ran that distance was like getting medicine or something from Athens to Marathon. and then their heart exploded and they died.
That's a hero for you.
Okay, I was here.
All right. So you wake up tomorrow, right? So you know, so sometimes I watch these documentaries, and when I watch these documentaries, I get all excited. Like the whole, what was the one about McDonald's? It was a documentary about McDonald's, Super Size Me, and then I watched this other one about juicing. So with those two things together, we went on a juice craze at the house. So everything was juice, and I'm still recovering, but I'll be okay. But do you wake up on Tuesday, you decide on Monday, you know what, I'm gonna run a marathon, and then on Tuesday, you go run a marathon. Does it happen like that? No. Right? Why?
Your heart will explode.
Right. So there is this thing called Couch to 5K. Anybody heard of that program, right? So it's designed to prepare you to actually run a marathon. And so there's small incremental steps that you take. And I want to say that being a leader in this work is very much the same way, right? That there are incremental steps that we take. So in doing that, sometimes we have these gaps between our intentions and our behaviors. And so as leaders, we have to monitor those gaps, right? So can anyone tell me what this is a picture of? Brazil nuts. Anyone familiar with Brazil nuts? All right, cool. So I also recognize that in some communities, Brazil nuts have another name. Anyone familiar with the other name that Brazil nuts? Okay, heard people use it or whatever. So the other name for Brazil nuts is the N-word toes, right? So people will say, particularly in the South, they'll say these are N-word toes. And it's typically older generations, and lots of people called it, right? So when we we're out with our great uncle, and he sees these things, and it sparks up, his childhood and all this kinds of stuff, and he's excited about seeing these nuts, and he's called it this other thing. What do we say to our great uncle who is about to call these something else? What do you say?
Don't call them that.
You say, don't call them that, right? And in their confusion, what might be some of that conversation that happens?
They'll get defensive.
That's what I've always called them.
They make it defensive. That's what I've always called it.
People are too sensitive.
People are too sensitive. I don't mean anything by it. And so oftentimes when people make these mistakes, we want to be gracious. And we are gracious. And we say, that's okay. Right? Or we're in the workplace and we'll let something slide, a comment. Right now in my household, we're working on the word crazy. I don't particularly care for the word crazy. I think there's better words to identify the cognitive dissonance when we see things other than crazy. And so I'm working with my kids on that. They're getting inundated from TV and media and all this kind of stuff to use that. So I got a pretty big battle. And so I think part of what we need to also do is to be accepting of that and helping people, meeting them where they are, and then help push them to the next level, which is, so what did you mean? Right? So I don't mean to hurt. I didn't mean anything by it. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I get you. You didn't mean anything by it. But what did you mean? I've always used that word. That's all I know. Okay, cool. Are there other words that could get you to the same destination, right? Helping them to be cognitive in their development. And so our point isn't to be, people will say, well, you're trying to be politically correct, or you're trying to push some kind of agenda. That's not my point. My point is to be effective. And so as leaders, our goal in looking at these principles of effective DEI leadership is to be effective, right? So if I have a cactus that's outside in my front lawn, and I have a cactus in my house, can I treat those cactuses the same? No, I can't. I shouldn't, right? If I want to be effective, how do I respond to these cactuses' needs?
Adapt to their environment.
Adapt to their environment. Meet them where they are, right? So this isn't, and this is why this version or what I'm offering you as these tools of leadership is different than purely social justice stuff. It's different than purely affirmative action or compliance stuff. Because what we're looking to do is to be effective in making sure that our organizations meet their goals. Which, interestingly enough, if we get these tools right for our organizations, they might help us be effective in our personal goals too, right? So I don't know if if you have intimate partner relationships or how those relationships go when it comes to having conflict, but there was a time in my life when I was always right in my interpersonal relationships, right? How do you think that went in terms of conflicts when I'm always right?
Not well.
Lots of sleeping on the couch, right? Did not go well. Did not go well, right?
We don't call that person wife.
I probably don't call that person wife, right? And so what we have to recognize is that sometimes I personally would rather be effective than to appear to be right, right? And so, people say, well, you're being a doormat. Anyone ever heard someone say that? You're letting people walk all over you. Please raise your hand if you have a doormat at your home or your domicile, right? What is the purpose of a doormat? To clean your shoes so when you get to the next destination, you are more clean than you were before you came in, right? So doormats have a purpose too. Right? So I'd rather be right. I'd rather be effective than to be right. Now, that's an artificial dichotomy, right? You can be both, right? But I'm suggesting that oftentimes people want to be right more than they want to be effective. And so it's, as leaders, that's a balance that we can strike. So let's get to some more good stuff. So this notion of effective versus ineffective. So when you hear words like right and wrong, good or bad, evil and righteous, I would suggest that those types of words are really starting to try to poke on your amygdala, right? The emotion center of your brain. We know that there are news stations, that there are commercials, there are radio stations and advertising that pokes at our amygdala, right? Have you ever watched some of those new cable news stations and they're telling really intense news or intense stories of either disaster or doom, and then they come with a commercial for some kind of medication to help you deal with anxiety. Anybody ever seen that? You ever think that that's interesting? Right? So they have this medication because they're pressing on that amygdala. And so what is required of us as leaders is to not just respond with our emotions. I see things and I say, that is wrong. But as a leader, I have to step back and say, okay, they're trying to get safety, significance, and belonging through that behavior. And then how does that relate to our goals or our values? And then I can deal with it more effectively. And so the tools that I'm about to share with you are designed to have us take a balcony seat so we can see the whole situation and make sure that it's aligning with our goals and our values within the organization. Sometimes I click. All right. So, let me see. Do I have another? I think I have another slide here. Yes. So if you can go to your Slido, and what I'd like for you to do is to write down what things do these plants have in common? What do they need that is common to them? What do they need that is common to them? You can write that down, and it'll pop up on the next screen when we go to it. So what do they need that's common to all of those plants? So we got light, water, light, care, maintenance, space, light energy, soil, TLC. Don't go chasing Nutrients, maintenance, energy, sunlight, space, attention, right? So, there are some things in common that those plants need, right? It's pretty obvious. But if we go back, can I water all those plants the same?
No.
No. Right? Can I give them all the same amount of sunlight? Can I treat them all equally? I could if I'm not trying to be effective. Right? So if I want to be ineffective, then I do what's easy for me as an organization as I'm dealing with this community of diverse individuals. I treat everybody the same. And you'll hear people say that. And I want to say that's a great place to start. However, are you getting the results that you want by doing that? Right? So my plants can't talk. They can't talk to me. So how do I know that what I'm doing with my plants is ineffective?
You don't see any growth?
If I don't see any growth,
They die?
they start to die. What are some signs that they're dying?
Yellow, dry.
They get yellowed, they get dried out, right? So they're not talking to me, but they're screaming at me, right? But how do I know that this plant isn't doing well?
Coworker took it away from you?
It gets rescued by somebody.
I mean, I'm just speaking hypothetically, right?
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, asking for a friend. So if, but how do I start? What needs to happen for me to notice that this is?
You have to be paying attention.
I got to pay attention. I have to be in relationship. I have to be in close proximity. Do you know why? You know, people say, "Well, talk to your plants and they do better." We know why that is, right? Right?
Forces you to pay more attention to them.
It forces you to pay more attention to them, and also they take in your CO2. They kick out oxygen, but they take in your CO2. So the more you talk to your plants, halitosis or not, you are giving them something that they need, and they kick back to you something that you need, right? And so when we think about this idea of being effective, equity is important. Giving people what they need in the ways that they need it. And the best way to find out what they need is to ask them. And Google. You need both of them. You need to come with some knowledge, and you need to ask some questions about the gaps in your knowledge, right? So important stuff. Let me get to this other stuff. All right, so how do we mind the gap between running the marathon and getting off the couch? So we do that through what I refer to as mindfulness. And so what is the core of that mindfulness? We mind that gap through making sure that our values are at the center of what we do. that our goals, our intentions, and our results are all aligned, right? And so when they are aligned, we are said to be mindful. We are said to be mindful. So I want you to go right back to your app and just tell me, of these five things, which do you think is most important, right, as a leader? So as a leader, which of these do you think is most important? One is organizational values, two is organizational goals, three is individual intentions, individual results, and the fifth one is, can't see it, so sorry.
Intention.
Is it?
Intention.
Okay, intentions, all right. Cool, so it looks like we're slowing down. So what I'd like you to do is at your table, if you could talk about, I'm gonna set a timer just for about 5 minutes. If you could talk about why you think these are ranked this way, or what are the implications of these being ranked this way, or how do you use this as a leader? I'll give you about 5 minutes to talk at your table, and if you can have one person prepared to kind of speak for the group, that would be great. So why is this important, or how should this inform how you think about DEI as a leader? All right, so I'll set the timer and we'll start. So I'll give you about 5 minutes.
It's up at it's a top. Yeah.
Yeah, that question right at the top. As a leader,
I was looking at, and I went towards individualism. I don't think any of them but I can easily see, especially with us. Yes. Yes, because they're all, and all of them are I always go back to
organizational values and beliefs, because again, we're learning to be as a leader of an organization that, like the effective style as best as possible with the organization.
And I think if you're an executive manager, your organization now is kind of their whole time is talking in very that's not one of
So if I can get at least 3 to 4 tables to at least kind of either address the specific question or talk about something that was we thought was important at your table around how these things ranked. I'm really curious about that. So yes.
We will start it off. So, did you say 3 more minutes?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, I was like, wait, are we ready? I guess our table kind of thought that maybe none of them are really wrong. I just kind of see, it's because we all have a different, for the most part, had a different choice. We chose something different. If it's all based upon your perspective.
Yeah. No, now, to be fair to me, I didn't ask you if they were wrong. Right? Okay, cool. All right. So.
Right. I get, yeah.
So how
I
did
just
you
think
come
they could all be important. Important, in different yeah. ways, That's a better way to put it. Depending on who you ask and what role they're in, they all play a different important.
Context matters,
Yes.
right? Context matters. All right,
Yeah.
cool. Other tables.
All right. So, I had a different answer than everyone else because I started with results, like your values and your intentions aren't all that important if you can't manifest them into something that makes a real world difference. But then as we were talking, it all goes back to the foundation, which is your values. So if you can get your intentions and your goals aligned with your values, then you'll get the results that you want in the world. So,
Yeah.
like, they kind of talked me into going back to that.
Yeah. Yeah, because we know people who want results without values. I think that's part of what you were talking about in terms of these people making money but not having any values, but they're getting results, they're getting, right? And so we want to be a little bit different, and our organizations demand that we be a little bit different. Yeah. One more table.
I would just add, that there's probably, a lot of us working in nonprofits have, I would suspect, but wouldn't presume to speak for anyone else, but just in my experience, a lot of people who work in nonprofits have a lot of idealism, and it's a great attribute to continue to aspire to a better world. I view those things personally as values, and some of my team members here that are, the cohort with my table also view those aspects as important, but there is personally, and our table came to a general consensus on the pragmatism of results, and that it's good to, you know, we can offer what could potentially be at times lip service or, you know, an idea that is aspired to without action. And so the results really do speak to the core of what mattered very greatly to our table. And then finally, especially as it relates to options 1 and 2 up there, the results and the values offer a tremendous amount of symbiosis. And of course, all of them do as well. But more than individual action, you know, we are all a team. And so, you know, the organization is represented by each individual and also the whole there. And that symbiosis is what allows the top 2 options really to be one and the same in a certain aspect.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think a great example of kind of the need to have us walk our talk or live our examples and or not be hypocrites is something that I've termed the George Floyd fatigue syndrome. Right? So right after the murder of George Floyd, people, organizations were really, you know, let's get on this diversity thing, let's do this anti-racism thing, let's do all this stuff. And you know, they were snapping up folks to be chief diversity officers and all sorts of stuff. And now, as I look at the market, it's imploded, and many of those chief diversity officers are now directors or managers, or as the roles are being, you know, because people have gotten a certain amount of fatigue because they were responding with a knee-jerk reaction as opposed to a strategic, long-term initiative. However, I want to say the organizations represented in this room are not those knee-jerk reaction folks. So I appreciate, because both of your organizations have been doing this work long before, and the tradition is such that I know you'll be doing it long after. The folks sitting in this room are a testament to that, because I've done other sessions years ago when the rooms didn't look like this. So I'm really, I want to get hats off to your respective organizations for doing that. But that fatigue syndrome is real. So.
Sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
watching it on like James
It was just tired.
You're just sleeping?
Yeah, it was just trying to sleep. So, so I just wanted to kind of close the loop on this particular piece as we get directly into the tools, that this notion of our intentions and our behaviors, the closer they can be aligned, the closer we are to self-actualization, right? So self-actualization is the pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's the top of the so-called hierarchy or pyramid, where you're acting in accordance to your values, and so that's important. And so when our intentions, values, goals, and behaviors are all aligned, I suggest that we're being mindful, right? That we're living a self-actualized life, and when we're not, we are operating off in a chaotic state, right? We're maladaptive. We're not in cognitive control, and that's a term that I like to use to think about, particularly when in states of ambiguity, that we need cognitive control. And how do we do that? We do that through aligning our intentions, values, and goals. Because when we are mindful, we recognize, and this is a tool from cognitive behavioral therapy, we recognize that our thoughts, feelings, and behavior are interconnected. And so you can start at any place to deal with those, but recognize that they're all interconnected. But at the core of that is operating, I heard the word authenticity on a number of occasions as we talked about being in this space. And this is how we get to some of that authenticity, making sure that our values and goals are at the center, and that we monitor our thoughts, our behaviors, and our feelings, starting at any point, to be in cognitive control and be mindful. Because if not, we're mindless, right? And so one of the things I think is really interesting, that in our modern Each generation has had their set of monsters, right? So Dracula came out of a context of kind of a psychosocial environment. Frankenstein came out of a psychosocial environment, right? And so our zombies have also come out of our psychosocial environment. And so what do zombies represent? What do they represent as a concept or a monster?
Death.
They represent death.
Control.
They're what?
Like usually they have no control. Like
Okay, they're dead. They're uncontrolled. But are they dead?
Undead.
They're the undead, right? So that's worse, right? So you're dead, but now you're alive, and you're uncontrolled, and you're unalive. What are some other features of zombies? They're brainless. And what are they after? Brains. They don't have a brain, but they want to eat brains, right? According to many of the stuff, right? And the scariest zombies to me are the fast ones. I can deal with the slow ones. And so fast, what was that, World War Z or something? And they was, I feel the same way about mice too. When they scurry, mice are mice, but like when they scurry, that's when they get creeped out, right? Anyway, so when we're mindless, we have our prey drive, right? Prey drive says, I'm gonna do what I need to do. I don't care who I step on, what happens, I'm gonna do what I need to do. I operate off my feelings. I'm in survival mode. And it's all about how I act. That becomes important, right? But when we're mindful, we can use the CBT model to help us be more effective. So there's a bunch of other stuff that is in your packet and handout, and you can kind of think about this maturity model. We won't spend a whole lot of time on that. It's pretty prima facie. And then, all that stuff is there. So again, this is a way, not the way. So I don't have the answer, but I'll give you some things that I found to be helpful. Again, some of the lectures you can find as QR codes, and you can kind of do those on your own. Here's some of the activities that we've kind of started. But when we think about this notion of diversity, it is recognizing our commonalities and differences, right? Why is that important to recognize both? Why is it important to recognize both commonalities and differences? Yes?
Well, I think if we focus on one and not the other, we're missing out on at least half of our story.
Yeah, we're missing out on half of the story, right? What does it take to hold two conflicting ideas at the same time?
Openness.
It takes some openness to do that.
Takes work.
It takes work. It takes work to do that. So why don't people want to, why don't they want to talk about our commonalities? Or why don't they want to talk about our differences in relationship to each other? Because it's a lot of work. I want to tell you something. I love our species. I think we're brilliant, but we're also oftentimes lazy. We try to take the quick way out, not because we're not really lazy, but we're trying to be efficient, right? And there's a fine line between being efficient and being lazy, right?
Are you talking about my son?
Efficient means let me do it as quickly as I can so I can get to the next thing. Lazy is let me do it as quickly as I can so I can get back to relaxation, right? That's the difference, right? And so when we think about these commonalities and differences, it is important for us to slow down, take time to do the work, which also means that we have to create an environment where we can have the time to actually do the work, right? I'm going to say something that is very controversial, but I want you to hear what I'm saying, all right? Oftentimes, when I taught at the charter school, I did a unit on particularly around like Black History Month or, you know, doing these other history months or Asian History Month or whatnot. And so part of the conversation would get to this as the punchline, sort of. So my Somali kids, when I say, you know, what do you know about your culture? What do you think about your culture? Boom, they pop off stuff, right? My Hmong kids, what do you like about your culture? What do you know about your culture? Boom, 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 boom. My Hispanic kids, boom, 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 boom. My Native kids, boom, 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 boom. My African American kids or just African descendant kids, boom, 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 boom. My biracial kids, boom, 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 boom. I asked my white kids, I'm American. No, I get that. I mean, we're all American, right? Well, I don't know. Problem. Why is that a problem? I'm in the classroom. All these other kids is popping off good stuff about themselves. I have a whole group that can't say anything. What's the problem?
They don't see it. They don't know. Nothing to add.
Without competence, they can't have competence, right? And so I failed as a teacher. I failed to give all of my kids some competence. Now, here's the controversial thing that I'm about to say. I wanted my students, my white students, to be proud of being white, but not have white pride. Do you see the distinction, the difference? Right? And so a lot of times in our environments, we don't create a real safe environment. So I was working at a medical facility. They had ERGs, employee resource groups. And there was one group that said, we want an employee resource group too. What group do you think that was? The white folks. And what do you think the organization said? Oh no, we're not touching that, right? So I leaned into the organization. I said, why? Why not have a white allies group? They were like, no, right? But if we're going to be effective about talking about this stuff, we got to start shining lights on these dark corners of things that people are talking about, right? These dark corners. And so, you know, I'm not saying what your organization should do, but I am saying it's an opportunity that sometimes we miss when we say we want to be all of these things and we don't take the brave step to do some of those things. Again, the difference between being proud and celebrating who people are versus using who people are to denigrate and belittle other people is the distinction, right? So I think that's interesting. And so this exercise you can do as a leader with folks that you're working with, talking about the commonalities and differences of these shapes. Just a really great conversation piece for any of your team meetings, just to get people acclimated to having diversity conversations. So these things are in your handouts and as well as in the book. Just want to talk a little bit about this concept of equity, and we may take just a 5-minute break for bathrooms right after this point, if you don't mind. Equity is this concept that everybody, equality is everybody needs something, but equity is making sure that people get what they need, right? And so the example here is that there are two individuals, and please associate the shoe that fits them, right? So draw a line from the individual with the size of the shoe is denoted on their person. And then the shoe size is below. So if you can connect the dots or connect the right shoe with the right person, feel free to do that just quickly, right? So it's equality is making sure that everybody gets shoes, right? So does everybody, in your diagram, does everybody at least have shoes, right? All right, cool. And so for the number 12, the size 12, how many shoes did they get? They got one pair, right? For the size 5, how many shoes did they get? Okay, so for some folks, they just gave them one, and in some cases, they got 2. Equality and then equity. So how did you determine who got what?
Well, I chose 1 because, some people will have more opportunities, meaning more shoe sizes or more options of shoes, so they have more choices than others. But if it's truly equal, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Each person gets a pair of shoes. But it's also important to acknowledge that others have more options in shoe sizes or, more options in general.
Cool.
Well, it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but equity is more like what they need, not what is equal. So the person might need to choose.
And if they're available,
Why not?
why not? Right? In terms of equity, right? So that's the difference.
Might not be, if there's shoes at home and size 5 might not be wearing shoes that day because they don't have any.
And who are we to judge? Right? So if these shoes help them get safety, significance, and belonging, which is what they're after, so it's so funny. So I was corrected. So I haven't been as highly evolved as you see today, right? I haven't always been that way, right? So I'm teaching over at the school, and we notice that there's a kid and his siblings who don't have winter coats. They're coming in with hoodies in the middle of the winter, which is not really that bad. Minnesotans, we get thick blood or whatever, and we can take that kind of stuff, but that's not the kind of school we want our kids to come to. So we went and bought coats and gloves and boots, because that's what you need and that's what you do. You don't just give people half the stuff, you give them all of what they need, and that's what we did. And so we go to drop the stuff off, and I get an attitude. So I'm with the social worker, and I get an attitude because I see a big screen TV up in the house. And I'm like, wait a minute, how y'all got a big screen TV with cable? And this was before you could stream everything, right? So, you're paying, $100-something a month for your cable stuff. I got an attitude. And then the social worker who was with me looked at me, he said, what business is it of yours? And I had to back up. Because if my life is hard, and that's how I seek joy, and I'm not hurting nobody, what business is it of yours? Right? And so we poured into the family, we got them the coats and stuff that we need. I got a lesson. Oh, that's what it was. My stuff was logging out. I timed out. Okay. So that's a great time for a break. So the social equity really isn't about what we think and what we feel, but actually providing resources and giving those resources to folks in ways that they find helpful. In your handbook, if you go to page 8, you'll see the chapter on equity. And then on page 11, I just want to ask this one question. Maybe we'll come back to this question. But one of the things that I believe, if you look on page 11, you'll also see that there is a domestic violence wheel that talks about how to create equitable relationships. And I like to compare that to creating equitable relationships within organizations. And so let's just take 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we will we'll talk about that page. All right? All right. So let's take 5 minutes for bio break, and then we'll come right back and get started.
Starting to. I was gonna say something.
Well, and I think I'm done with the slide.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think. Right, no, the difference is, so do you take the medication in consideration? We can't use that, that's theirs and proprietary, you know, like, they didn't give us. Okay. Somebody asked me that, I'm like. Yeah, they would finalize it.
Well, my
Yeah, that's.
Have we been in a session before together? I've just done some other stuff with LSS. So way before the pandemic, I've done a lot of stuff with like Safe Harbor, and all the some you just have this spirit that's where people got to like recipients.
I think that's where the is sending us for the thing which I don't know that either. I think that's good because then we can have the button pass. Not better, but
the fun thing is like,
so she said she was trying to take some time and try to figure out something to put it in, and then if it's not in today, and then bring it to and I said, but I laughed because I'm like, oh, this is for you, what church is that?
back into self section. But it's just a funny thing, like, it's a mirror and also like, this idea of like, extra, as so it's used as, you know, and then, that, it's like, you know, you just don't have that with, it's just so much more.
All right. So I have, there are a couple of things that I've learned, and it's interesting when I make products. So I have some online courses that I've made. I have some apps and all sorts of stuff. And when I go to try to sell some of those, because again, I'm a bad capitalist. So when I go to sell some of those, people ask me, well, who is the target audience for this product that you make? And I always have a problem answering that because the target audience is me. Because I've made it to solve a problem that's going on with me, or to develop a tool that I could use to communicate something that's going on with me. And so many of the things that you see before you are things like that. But, and so one of the things that I've come to is to recognize that when we don't have equity, oftentimes in its place, we end up with violence, right? When we don't have equity, we end up with violence. And I'm not necessarily talking about physical violence, but I'm talking about a very specific kind of violence, right? So, please raise your hand if you've ever been disrespected or seen someone be disrespected. All right, cool. So when that disrespect happens, what is the emotional residue of that disrespect? Anger. Resentment. What's that? Untrustworthy. Sadness. Isolation. Ashamed. Defensiveness. So that's all the residue of that, right? What happens when someone is physically violent? What is the emotional residue there? Fear. Anger.
Powerlessness.
Trauma. And powerlessness. Is there a difference between the disrespect, or is there a relationship between the disrespect and the emotional response, and the physical abuse and the emotional response?
Mentally, both can have similar reactions.
I would say in a lot of ways they are very similar, if not the same, in the emotional residue that happens. So if I'm in a situation where you don't see all of me, and I'm not getting equitable treatment, I'm being disrespected. Disrespect is a form of violence, if you follow my logic, right? And so how do we prevent violence? We create these spaces of equity where we listen to folks. We ask their opinions. We help them. Part of our job as helpers and as leaders is to give people tools to help them make better decisions for themselves, which undercuts any of that violence. And you'll see that on page, a little bit on page 11 in your handbook. All right? So let's move over to, if you can stick in your handbook just for a second, we're going to move over to inclusion. And I'd like for you to go to page 15, which is very similar to what you have on the screen. And we've kind of talked about commonalities and differences, so we've talked about this notion of diversity. What I'd like for you to do is to look at these geometric shapes on the left and circle or find them on in the image in the right, or facsimiles of those geometric shapes. Can you see those geometric shapes on the right, in the right image? So diversity is at the top, and you see those geometric shapes. Do you see either forms or functions of those geometric shapes in that inclusion on the left? Again, a quick activity you can do at a team meeting with your team, with your leadership group. What's the lesson? What's the in terms of just pragmatism? What's the lesson in doing that exercise?
It takes all different types to build a community.
Yeah, it takes all different types of diversity to build a community. What's another way to use this metaphor in your leadership journey? What's that? We create a better picture together, right? So our commonalities and our differences, and we all don't play the same role, right? So we don't all have to be the thing, but we can function together. At the bottom, what I'd like for you to do is to at your tables, just have a conversation about the stages of inclusion, right? So at the bottom, you'll see the stages of inclusion on the bottom of page 15. And just talk about how would you facilitate moving folks along this continuum, all right? So I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes to talk about that at your table. So looking at that continuum of inclusion, how would you move, or how do you move, or what things in your organizations help people move along this continuum? All right, so 5 minutes.
Support, it made me feel like